Hello, everyone. Dr. Nikhil Verma here with another edition of Things I Didn't Learn in Med School. This is the final video in my Path to Private Practice mini series. The other videos that I've produced in these series was more about practice management and tips and tricks and other tools that I wish I had when I started my private practice. And that's the basis of the whole lecture. Now, I gave this lecture at a conference I was a part of a few months ago at this point. It was a fellowship conference where several of the fellows in that graduated from my fellowship had gotten together and we discussed a lot of things in the medical field. And this was the lecture that I was asked to give and one that I'm really wanted to give. And uh, here we are. I wanted this information to be out publicly too. I had other people ask me for these videos and these tips and tricks, but today's video is a little less practical and more philosophical, and it really highlights my philosophy in life and how I came to the decision to start my private practice straight out of fellowship. I think this is a very useful thought experiment for individuals who are interested in starting their own private practice, but also a lot of medical students and residents and fellows out there that are questioning what their next step in life is. And I'm not saying I'm right in all this. Um, it's just kind of what fit for me, especially at this time of my life. So yeah, without further ado, let's get to it. Again, these are all slides. I hopefully you guys can go back and look at these at your own pace. Um, but yeah, so here we go. Here are several different books. I didn't put this in a specific order to um, to talk about each one individually, but I think each one has its own importance, and we'll kind of get through all of these. Um, this this almanac of Naval Ravikant. If you don't know Naval, he's been a angel investor, highly successful investor, who has very interesting philosophies of life, and he was kind of became an internet sensation after a tweet storm that was given probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. Um, and he had already been successful financially at this point, but he kind of had this tweet storm of like how to get rich without getting lucky or something along those lines. And it was actually a fantastic read. After that, he was on podcasts with Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss and a handful of other people. And he has a very interesting philosophy of life, but he talks about how there are different ways to make money in the world, and you can work for money, or you can have money work for you. So this is kind of like a tipping off point at the beginning of, how do I get to that point where I'm making my money work for me? One thing I realized during this period was that I'm never going to make the money that work for me if I'm working in an institutional system for my entirety of my life. What that means is if I show up every week, every day just to get a paycheck, being a cog in the wheel, um, I would never be able to use that money to leverage my own self worth of, well, financially and wealth. And it would also, for me, be not necessarily the best use of my time when I feel there'd be other tools that I can offer and other things that I can offer to the world outside of my well defined script of what I'm expected to do in a practice or in an institution. So that was one really big thing that I took from this. The next one I want to talk about here is this video with Alex Hormozy. Um, he's if you don't know who he is, he's actually a very interesting um, individual. He is really, if nothing else, a marketing genius. He's really found the way to market things, scale things, and he's become so successful that now he's into acquisitions of companies and trading companies. And one of the hardest workers that I've seen, at least what is presented in the public eye. And I don't think you would come to the kind of fame and success that he has if you don't have something to back it up. Now, I don't want to get too much into, there's a lot of hate out for him in the world, but I don't want to get too much into that because I do think he's successful. Him and his wife seem to grind very hard, work really hard, and they have at least what seems on paper the accolades to back it up. But his concept is it's not the game itself, meaning it's not the business itself, it's how long can you be in the game. That is where the capital starts to compound over time. And of course, this doesn't mean that you can have an unsuccessful business and an unsuccessful business model with holes in your staffing and holes in your workflows, and it can be successful. But it's really trying to learn the game from within. And the longer you're in it, the more and more you learn, the more and more successful you'll be over time. And this might mean that you fail at something originally and you jump to another job or you jump to another industry, or just tweak it enough where you stay within the own industry and make things grow from there. Now, in my opinion, that's what I'm seeing myself. Each year since I've started my private practice has been exponentially better than the last, and more opportunities present themselves, and more patients are coming to see me, and more I learn much more about business and how to run a business and how to deal with certain parts of business that you don't learn in med school, or you don't really learn even going to business school. Some of these things you have to learn in real life, and that's where I see this, and I'm agreeing with this, and I would never want to start another private practice from scratch. But if I were to do a private practice again, it would be much easier. If I was to just start another business, which I may or may not in the next 10, 15 years, who knows, it would be much easier. That is one of the concepts. It's not the game itself, it's time in the game. It's how many reps have you done of this same thing over and over. He's also one that talks a lot about how much are you willing to do the boring stuff? How often are you willing to do the boring stuff? How often are you willing to look at your balance sheets and make sure everything looks okay? You take a look at your profit loss statements. How frequently are you checking in with your staff? How frequently are you cleaning things in the office? How often are you doing workshops and seminars to improve your practices? These are really important things, and you don't want to do them all the time, but you have to do them. Uh, yeah, so a good one to kind of wrap up with his. Now, this next one is a concept that is switching a little gears, and I'm going to talk about Bill Perkins here. Um, Really, this concept of die with zero. Now I haven't read this book. I've only heard him on a few podcasts, but one of the concepts is that, and I'm not trying to get too grim about these things, but this is the reality of what shaped my mentality over the past few years. When we're alive, quite often we are constantly thinking about our future, not really living in the moment, not taking advantage of what we have in the bank account. We're investing and saving for the future and saving for our kids, which I think is fantastic. saving for our retirements. When in reality, the generational wealth that the baby boomers have is so exponentially higher than what their expected life um, spending is to be. And this is the concept of have a business plan, have a retirement plan, and make sure you're above that retirement plan. But you also have to enjoy life at some point. And I think that's one thing that I've realized during residency is, there's time to retire. I'm fortunate enough that I started investing in my Roth IRA when I was 18. Though it was a small account, and I didn't put much contributions to it towards until residency or in fellowship. And now, now different story, but I'm fortunate enough that I have a base there. Um, and if you don't have a base, that's okay. I think it's still important to max out your retirements and maybe have some other investments, but you have to enjoy your life at some point. This is a good transition to Sahil Bloom, and he talks about, if you haven't read this book, Five Types of Wealth, I think it's a fantastic book. If you don't know who he has a fantastic newsletter. It really a lot of life tips and mental models of how to approach life and things in life. One of the stories he talks about is, and he might have not come up with this, but he does talk about it a lot, is any one of us in the world would give up what we have. Maybe not what we have. Take that back. We would exchange positions with Warren Buffett to have his billions of dollars and be the most successful investor of all time, and have that kind of money. But he's, 90 years old, and he would probably give up most of his fortune to be young again. And that's one of the things that I don't think we think about. We think about our value to society and value to ourselves based off of our bank accounts. And we don't think about how lucky we have it when we're young and able to do all these things, travel the world, spend time volunteering, spending time learning about yourself and spirituality and consciousness, spending time just living. A lot of the jobs that were offered to me and I was looking at were working these insane 80-hour work weeks, um, being in the OR for 3-4 days a week, um, multiple hours a day. And, there's a trade-off, the salary would be crazy, but at what cost of your life and your livelihood? And I know, I get it. This is probably a very millennial thought process, but the concept for me is I still work all those hours, but there's a freedom that I have about it, that I get to choose how I spend those hours. And I choose how I want to approach life instead of being dictated by someone else or a company or a hospital system or what have you. So that's one really important thing that struck a chord with me in that. Uh, he has a lot of other really good points in there. One of the conversations he has is, no one is going to remember how hard you worked more than your kids. From the ages of when they're born until about 12 or 13 ish, the parents are the most important people in their lives. before they have their best friends, before they have their girlfriends, boyfriends, before they have a favorite teacher, before they have a favorite coach, before they have other influential parents in their life. The parents are the most influential people. And your kids are going to remember that you weren't there for them. Um, from my own experience, I do remember my dad was hardly there because he was working so hard. And we were at school, and after work he would be there, but not always, right? Like he worked late hours and he was very successful. And we have a great relationship now. I'm very fortunate that I picked up golf when I did, and he and I can talk a lot about golf. He helps me with my practice quite frequently, so I talk to him a lot about that. He loves to watch basketball, loves to watch football, so we get to talk about those things. So we have a great relationship now. But I do remember growing up that he wasn't there as much, and maybe I'm magnifying in my mind looking back, but it's one of those things that you wish that you just spent more time with them back back in the day. I see a lot of my friends now spending so much time with their kids, and I love it. I just love how they're coaches for their teams. They take them to movies, they take them out to eat, they take them on to like sporting events. And I think that's fantastic. Um, I don't have kids myself, and I think if I ever do have kids, I do want to spend that time. I don't want to spend my best years working so hard where I'm hardly around to be with my kids. Um, we get to go over to talk about Morgan Housel, who is also very, very interesting. Um, I've read The Psychology of Money. I think it's a fantastic book, one of the best books I've ever read. I'm really interested in reading Same as Ever. Um, tell you a story about him. He was out skiing with three, four of his friends, and they just had a long day, good, triple diamond. I mean, probably way outside of anything that I could ever try. But I guess he's a good skier and grew up skiing, and he went out with his friends, and at one point he's like, "Hey guys, I'm just gonna go home. Um, I think I'm a little tired." His friends are saying, "That's fine. We're gonna do a few more runs. We'll meet you back at the cabin." Well, tragically, those friends were never seen again. And this highlights the importance of the shortness of life, and that we're all going to meet our makers at some point or the other. The book, The Psychology of Money, challenges the conventional narrative of like highlighting the contentment of building wealth and also living life to its fullest potential. It really valuable is valuable in insights of like where the true wealth that we might have as individuals aren't necessarily in the financial assets that are in our bank accounts, but the other financial assets that we have in life. And I think that's a very important concept. Something that I think about frequently, um, for various reasons of losing friends at a young age, me getting a serious car accident when I was 18 years old myself, and it really, really struck a chord with me when I read this story. Now, this is probably the other biggest portion. And when I gave this lecture previously, I had multiple people walk up to me outside the lecture hall, um, and pull me aside and say, "Hey, I thought your lecture was great, but it really struck a chord with me when you talked about this next portion." When we are crazy about making money, we will do extraordinary things to move halfway across the country, away from our friends and family, just to make more money. And one of the most underrated things that we don't think about is We have, by our 30s, and if we say our average life expectancy is to our 80s, you know, we'll say, yeah, sorry, take that back. Obviously, it's a little difficult to even talk about, but it's because it's a deep topic of, you know, I'm just going to propose a question. How many summers do you have left with your family? Most of our parents, if you're in your 30s, 40s, are 50, 60, 70 years old. And if our average life expectancy is in their 70s, you might have 20 more summers with them. If you live halfway across the world, halfway across the nation, and you're seeing them 2 or 3 times a year, you're only going to see them 20 or 30, 40 more times in your entire life. And then they're going to get sick. And then you're going to be so stressed that you weren't there. And you're going to really regret the time that wasn't spent with them. That was a massive decision that I had to make, of all these people offering me jobs in all different parts of the US. And I was telling them there is a part of me that needs to come back to where my family is. It's not only my family, but I have a lot of close friends that are still in the Columbus area. You know, I don't know, mom and dad are going to watch this. I don't think they typically watch my things, but I don't know how much more time I have with them, and I want to squeeze every moment that I can with them. And this comes up in Sahil Bloom's book, where he had this conversation with somebody. Someone sat down with him and said, "Hey, man, like, how's life?" He's like, I this, that. And he's like, that was his case. He only saw his parents a couple times a year. They lived in New York. He lived in California. And he made the hard decision of leaving a really successful financial job to move back closer with them. He's also one that spends a lot of time with his son, and he glorifies the time that he gets to spend with them and just sitting there and living life with his family. And at the end of the day, I find that more valuable than anything else. And I hope you do too. I hope you value the time that you have with yourself, with your family, with your kids, with your parents, with your other loved ones, because that's not something that you can have back. When our parents eventually do pass and they transfer this exponential amount of money to us, I would bet most of us will be financially satisfied, maybe not financially successful or financially set for life, but we'd be financially satisfied, satiated, if you will. And you would probably give up all that money your inheritance, just to spend more time with them. This is something that Tim Urban, blogger, talks about as well. And this is essentially your life. Each on the x-axis, obviously the weeks of the year, so we have 52 weeks, and then your age to 80 whatever. And look at all the very important things in your life. When you graduate school, in your career, all these important things that happen in these time frames. And that goes back to just talking about, where do you lie your values in life? If financial success is your number one motivator of life, then I say more power to you. I think that's fantastic. I think there's some people in the world that need that drive. But especially in the field of medicine, where we spent so many hours, so many sacrifices from high school to college to undergrad, to grad school to med school to residency to fellowship into our early career, where does the value lie? I will happily give up a few $100,000 early in my career to not succumb to that regret at the end of my life of saying, if I would have done things differently, what would have happened? Um, I might not be as successful as some of you out there, and I might never make as much money as some of you out there, and that's something I'm going to have to deal with, something I'm going to have to live with. But at least I know that I did it the way that I wanted to do it, and I get to practice medicine the way I want to practice medicine. I get to have the fulfillment of knowing that I made that choice, that to sacrifice some financial gains for the betterment of my own health, my own social wealth, and my own happiness. So, anyways, everyone, I know this was a little bit deeper. I do hope that you find it useful, and I hope you share it. If you have questions, comments, concerns, drop them below. Let's link up, connect with me on my social medias, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.